All right. Can you have everyone turn on, is everyone's camera on? Okay, so good afternoon. I would like to call to order the meeting for Senate Revenue on Economic Development. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Senator Dennis.
Here.
Senator Roddey.
Here.
Senator Kekeffer.
Here.
Senator Severs-Gansert. Chair Neal.
Here. Okay, thank you. So before we begin, I would like to explain how virtual committee meetings work. This is a new process for all of us. Hopefully we're getting our feet warm as we're several weeks in. As you know, the legislative building is currently closed to the public, and so all meetings will be held virtually, meaning committee members and staff and everyone else will participate through Zoom, video conference, or by telephone. However, there are several ways in which members of the public can engage with us and participate. You can log on to Nellis, which is accessible through the legislative website. When you log on, you can register to participate in the committee meeting through the new system on Nellis, which places you in line to testify on a bill or provide public comment during the meeting. You can also submit written testimony to the committee's email address or fax number listed on the agenda. You can also share your opinion via the legislator's opinion application on Nellis. If you're viewing the committee meetings online, you can view through Nellis or through the legislator's YouTube channel. During the 2021 legislative session, to testify on a bill or provide public comment, members of the public must first register for the meeting they would like to participate in. Committee meetings are listed in several places on Nellis, and to register, simply click the participate button near the date and time, and then you will be required to fill in information on the agenda that you're interested in. Just to note that while meeting registration is required, it does not guarantee that everyone will be able to speak. When you're on the phone line, please pay attention to which bill is being considered or the presentation, and follow the verbal prompts provided by BPS staff so that you know which keys to press to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Staff will call on you to speak by the last 3 digits of your phone number. The detailed instructions for participating in committee meetings are also available on the help page, which is linked in the banner at the top of every page on Nellis. If you need assistance with any of these processes, or you would like help to receive electronic notification of the committee's agenda and minutes, please contact the committee manager at the committee email listed on the agenda. So for today, our presentation will be from the Assessor's office, Nevada Assessors from Clark County, and Miss Brianna Johnson and Dave Dolly from the Carson City Assessor. They're going to give us a high-level overview on property taxes. So, Ms. Johnson, are you going to go first, or Mr. Dolly?
I am going to go first, Chairwoman.
Okay.
And I do believe I have to share my screen. Okay. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on. Share. Okay. Can everyone see slide 1 of the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so as Chairwoman Neal stated, Dave Dolly and I are going to give you a broad overview of what it is the assessors do when valuing property in the state of Nevada. So the first thing is what the assessor does. So the assessor is required by Nevada law to discover, list, and value all real and personal property within the county. And the key word in this slide, or the key thing when we talk about what the assessor does, it is value. we are responsible for valuing. A lot of times people confuse us with taxes, but the assessor role is really about valuing the property. And we don't just do this by the seat of our pants. We do have regulations and laws to follow. And so we are governed by NRS 361 and NAC 361 to help us to set values in our counties or in the state. Tax roll dates. The lien date is July 1. So that is the date that anything that is in place as of July 1, it is subject to taxation. And we work by fiscal year. So the secured roll that we are in right now started in July 1 of 2020, and it will end June 30th of 2021. And next year's fiscal year will be July 1 of 2021 through June 30th of 2022. So sometimes we may refer to fiscal year, and I'm sure you all are familiar with fiscal year, but we just may use the last year of the fiscal year. So we might say for this year, FY21, or for next year, FY22. And I may reference that throughout the presentation. So just so you are aware, when I say FY21 or FY22, I am speaking in fiscal year terms. We also value the unsecured roll, which is personal property. And the dates for personal property as we start discovery is May 1, and it closes April 30th. However, it has the same lien date of July 1 and the fiscal year as the secured tax roll. NRS 361-227, although there are many statutes that we are governed by, this one is probably the one we rely on the most. And this is the statute that tells us how to value properties in our counties. So land is valued at full cash value. Improvements are valued using replacement cost new less depreciation at 1.5% per year, up to 50 years, max depreciation of 75%. We use the Marshall and Swift manual that we are mandated to use by the state, and we revalue all properties in our county annually. And here in Clark, just to give you an idea, we just reached over 800,000 parcels that we have to value on an annual basis. The property valuation formula is as follows. As I mentioned, land is valued based on market. When we're valuing land, we're tracking sales all year long to help us determine what land sales are going for to help us value our land parcels. As I mentioned previously, our improvements are valued using the Marshall and Swift manual, using replacement cost new, less depreciation. When we add these two values together, the land component plus the improvements or replacement cost new, less any depreciation, we then get a total taxable value. The total taxable value helps us to determine if we are exceeding market, because by law, we cannot exceed market value. So the total taxable value helps us to test against the market to make sure that we are not exceeding full cash value of a property. And I can give you an example of that. Perhaps a property owner just purchased a brand new home for $250,000, and when we set our total taxable value, perhaps we're at $260,000, and we look throughout that homogeneous neighborhood for all of those tract type homes to say, are we exceeding, or did this particular property owner just get a deal, or what happened with that property, just to make sure we're not exceeding. But if we can look at all the properties in a neighborhood and say, you know, most of these homes are selling brand new at $250, $240, $255, and we're at $260, Perhaps we are exceeding market, and then perhaps we have to make adjustments so that we are not exceeding market. So again, total taxable value is just our way to test that we are not exceeding full cash value. Our property tax cap formula. So then we take the taxable value, once we have established that we are not exceeding, times the assessment ratio of 0.35. That gives us our assessed value. This value, as I mentioned before, because the assessor's office is about value, we take the $250,000 per se, the house is valued at $250,000, times the assessment ratio. That gives us $87,500 assessed value. This is where the assessor's role stops. Once we have determined the taxable value and we have an assessed value, we're done with our process, and then we send all of these values down to the treasurer. The treasurer then in turn calculates taxes. So the next portion of this slide shows you the assessed value times the tax rate. Here in Clark, we have about 110 or so tax rates, depending on where you are within the county. There's a tax rate assigned to that district, and then that gives you your taxes as assessed. So the $87,500 times the tax rate, and this is just a tax rate that I use down here in Clark, gives you a tax amount of $2,868.43. Now, this calculation typically only works on first-time properties added to our tax rolls. That's when you will see that a property is taxed as assessed in most cases, when it is a brand new improvement added to our tax roll. So sometimes we get the question where people are in the market to buy a new home, they're not quite sure what the taxes are going to be, and we usually typically tell them just estimate about 1% of purchase price is about what you would pay in taxes. And as you can see, this is a little bit more than that, but it's in the ballpark. Abatements. This is also another area of valuation that we deal with. And you can see that we have the residential abatement or tax cap abatement for residential properties. And these type of properties are owner occupied or rentals that are at or below the HUD rates. We have all other properties which would fall under the secondary tax cap. We also have GOED, or the Office of Economic Development. Those are abatements that are applied to some of our parcels. We have lead abatements, and we also have some renewable energy abatements. But the abatement that we are going to talk most about today is the tax cap abatement law. And the tax cap abatement law started in fiscal year 2005-2006. And it limits the amount that taxes can increase each year, not value. So we get a lot of calls when people receive their notice of value cards in December, and their concern is that their value went up more than the 3%. And so we have to remind them that there is no cap on value. There is only a cap on taxes. And that tax cap is 3% on primary residences, 3% on residential dwellings that fall within the HUD rental rates, and up to 8% for all other property types, meaning land, commercial, anything other than your primary residence or a residential rental dwelling that falls within the rental rates. So that's how the tax cap law reads. Clark's historical tax cap. So as you can see, from fiscal years 2006 to fiscal year 11, Clark's tax cap were 3% and 8% only. We didn't have anything other than that from fiscal year 06 all the way through fiscal year 11. In fiscal year 12, that's when we saw the secondary tax cap change. The primary stayed at 3, and the secondary cap was 6.3. And as you follow that along, you can see that the secondary cap changed variously throughout the other fiscal years. But the important ones to point out here is that you'll see in fiscal year 17 and fiscal year 18, those were the 2 years, which are here, that both caps fell below the 3%. Then in fiscal year 19, you will see that the secondary tax cap went to 4.2. In fiscal year 20, the secondary tax cap went to 4.8. And here we are in fiscal year 21, where the secondary tax cap is 6.7. I do believe that Dave mentioned that the proposed tax rates for 22 are available on the website, but I wasn't able to locate them to know what ours is in Clark for FY22. So I'll be looking for that information. But FY21, we were at 6.7 for the other, and obviously 3% for the primary. And just to show you the differences between the counties, this is what Clark's tax cap looked like. But the next slide is going to show you what Carson's tax cap looked like. So as you can see, in fiscal year 06 for Carson, they were at 3 and 5.8, keeping in mind that Clark was at 3 and 8 through fiscal year 11. In Carson, they only reached the 8% or other cap in fiscal year 09. So these are the differences, even though we're in the same state, how the tax cap can vary between counties. And then you will notice in FY17 and FY18, just like in Clark, this is the first year they too went below the 3%. And as we fast forward to FY21, Clark is at 6.7%, but Carson is at 3.6%. So I put these two slides in there just to show you the comparison between the different counties, even though we're in the same state, how the tax caps can differ.
Brianna, may I cut in real quick? I apologize.
No, you're fine.
This is Dave Dolly, Carson City Assessor. Good afternoon. Your tax cap, proposed tax cap for this year is 7.7%. Just want to throw that out.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave. Now this next slide is a property tax calculation sample. And what this is going to demonstrate is a little bit about how the tax cap works. And again, forgive me, I don't want to overstep my boundaries because as I mentioned in the previous slides, our role stops at the assessed value. But I will go into the taxes and how the tax cap works. So if we could look at year 1, you can see that this is an example for a brand new property being added to the tax roll in year 1. The land value is $64,000. The building value, replacement cost new, no depreciation of $186,000. And the reason there is no depreciation, because it is the first year on the tax roll. Anything added to the tax roll for the first time does not receive depreciation. So we have the land value at $64,000, the improvement value at $186,000. Add those two together, we have the $250,000. So I'm trying to stay consistent with my first example. $250,000 total taxable. Now we have the assessment ratio at 35%. The assessed value is $87,500. That's where we stop, send the values to the treasurer, and then they calculate taxes. The tax rate for this particular scenario is the 3.2782. And what we do is take 100 of that. So it'll be 0.032782. Times the assessed value gives us a tax amount of $2,868.43. Those are the taxes they would pay in year 1. Now we fast forward to year 2. The assessor has done their job. They've determined that the land is now increased to $67,000. The building value, RCN, replacement cost new, Marshall and Swift, when we put the cost tables into our system, has determined that this house is now on a cost basis worth $196,000 less year one. Not year one, we're in year two, but 1.5% depreciation because now the house is 1 year of age. As we talked about, it depreciates at 1.5% per year. So that 1.5% times the 196 is going to take $2,940 off of the improvements. So now we have a total taxable value of $260,060 in year two for that same house. Take it times the assessment ratio of 35%. The assessed value this year is now $91,021 in year two. Times that by the tax rate, taxes as assessed. So the treasurer's office always calculates taxes as assessed because the way the law reads, it is the lesser of the two, either the tax cap or taxes as assessed, it's the lesser of the two. So we are year two, taxes as assessed are $2,983.85. But what the treasurer does is they say, what were the taxes paid in the previous year? So we look back to year one and they paid $2,868.43. The treasurer is then going to multiply that by 3%, 1.03. That brings us to $2,954.48 because we are assuming that this is a primary residence and they're getting the 3% tax cap. So in year two, the treasurer says taxes as assessed is $29.83.85, and the capped taxes are $29.54.48. We take the lower of the two, so that's why it's highlighted in yellow. Because in year two, they're going to pay taxes on the $29.54.48. Now we fast forward to year three. The assessor again has done their valuation and has determined that the land value now is $70,000. Marshall and Swift, we put the cost tables in and it has given us the value of $195,000, which is just $1,000 less. It happens. And now we are at depreciation of 3% because it's 1.5% per year. So this year it's 3%. We take the $58.50 off of that. Now here is where things can get a little tricky. In year three, the property owner decided to add a pool to their residence, which is fine. We see this happen all the time. So the pool is, according to Marshall and Swift, $50,000. And that is the amount that's going to be taxed because the pool is new and there is no depreciation on the pool. It's strictly at cost. Totaling all of those together, you get $309,150 times the assessment ratio of 0.35. The assessed value this year is now $108,203. $100,008,203 times the tax rate, which means taxes as assessed for year three comes to $3,547.09. But again, the treasurer says, what was paid in year two? In year two, they paid $2,954.48. And again, that number is highlighted in yellow. And they capped that number by 3%. That gives us $3,043.11. But what they have to do is add the pool to that. And you'll see I've highlighted those in green because the pool is not subject to the tax cap. The pool is going to be taxed at full value. So they have the capped tax of $3,043.11. They have to add in the pool. And so that gives a total tax of $3,616.80. So what has been determined in year three is taxes as assessed is lower than the capped tax. So they will pay on taxes as assessed, and that's why that number is highlighted in yellow. Any questions? Okay.
Members, any questions on this slide?
Moving on.
Okay.
So that is everything that we do on the real property side as far as taxes and the tax cap. And now we have other taxes, and I'm going to let Dave start with the presentation from here.
Thank you, Brianna. Madam Chair, Dave Dolly, Carson City Assessor. Brianna, can we
Madam
go
Chair,
back
I'm
to-
sorry, I didn't realize we were moving to other taxes altogether, so I didn't necessarily have a question on that slide, but did have a question on property taxes.
Oh, absolutely.
I just wanted to go back real quick to discuss the alternative cap a little bit. If we could go back to slide number 12, because you'll see.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One too far. There you go. What I wanted to discuss here is you see these numbers are all over the place. And the calculations to actually determine what these numbers are is, first off, we're going to be, well, actually we don't. The Department of Taxation looks at the 10-year rolling average of the assessed valuation of the county to see whether what percentage that is. They then compare that to CPI times 2. Whichever number is greater, they then compare it to the 8%. And then whichever of those two numbers is actually the lowest is what the alternative cap is going to be for that particular year. So you can tell in Carson City, we've only reached the 8%. Our 10-year rolling average was only over the 8% once. All the other times it's always been under. We've been, up until this current year, we've been using CPI times 2 because our 10-year rolling average has been a negative for the last 10 years because we're still trying to come out of the big bubble that took place back in 2008. We in Carson City are about 2 years behind Washoe County in our values. And so the market itself takes effect 2 years later here for us. And so we're just now getting to the point where our 10-year rolling average is a positive. And so that's why you're seeing the difference here in the actual number. And I mention this because there is a bill that was introduced that addresses this exact thing today. So do you want me to go on to personal property real quick, or?
I'll let Senator Roddey ask her question before.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for including the example of when we add a pool, because I think that that's something that folks get a little bit confused on, about that a property is not necessarily fixed in its valuation separate from any improvements. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the projects that people do to maintain their house. I talk about depreciation with a lot of people. And when I get into those conversations, it often goes to this place of, well, my property is getting older, therefore it's depreciating, therefore we deserve this 1.5% depreciation calculation. And so I thought it might be helpful for you to explain how maintenance types of improvements, so a new roof or replacement windows, how that gets treated in the valuation process and that interaction with depreciation.
Dave, did you want to answer that one, or?
Well, in Carson City, thank you, Senator Roddey. In Carson City, what happens is we're not looking at that. We're not going to, the home is the home. It gets the depreciation from the age of the structure itself. If they put new windows in, we're not going to go ahead and actually put those in as new outside the cap. So it would just continue with the same depreciation that it has. What Brianna was talking about were major improvements. If they completely gut the inside of the structure itself and they put new insulation, they put new walls, new plumbing, new all that kind of good stuff, at that point it's going to cause a new effective age for the house. And at that point, then the structure itself would actually lose depreciation. So hypothetically, if you had a home that was built in 1970 and they completely gutted the home in 2010 or 2015, they're replacing the part of the structure that was originally there, And so they may have a new effective age of 1990. And so they would lose the depreciation they had from 1970 to 1990. And so the actual value of the assessed value would increase.
But to be clear, that's only on a major renovation where they're significantly altering the house and bringing the house back up to modern, as opposed to what the vast majority of property owners will be doing, which is new countertops and new flooring in their kitchen, maybe some new cabinets, new appliances. None of the basic maintenance affects the valuation of the property.
Senator Reddy, that is correct.
So then in that case, their property, two properties right next to each other, and I know this, we don't do market-based, but two properties right next to each other might have a very different market value because one has been maintained and the other one has not. But at the same time, they will both be benefiting exactly the same from depreciation, regardless of how much their property has actually gone down in value because it is aged.
Senator Reddy, that is correct.
Thank you.
And I'll also add, Senator Roddey, that there are times where people obviously do additions or things of that nature. And depending on the size of the addition, I'm sorry, my video was up. It would determine whether or not we do an effective age as well. So sometimes additions add to that, and that is all outside of the tax cap.
And that's a great example, Ms. Johnson. And so just for clarity there, if there was an addition, does the entire house change to 1990, as in Dave Dolly's example, or just the square footage percentage that is new?
Just the square footage percentage, and then it gives us a new effective age.
So you make a sort of an average effective age based on this.
The size.
Half of it's 1950, half of it's 2000, so we're just going to call it 1975.
Exactly. Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Dolly.
Oh, thank you, Chairwoman Neal. So the other personal or the other taxes that we were referring to are personal property taxes. And Brianna, if you could share your screen real quick again, please. In the state of Nevada, we actually tax personal property. We would tax commercial businesses, aircraft, mobile homes, porta-hangers, billboards. We have currently 9 different depreciation tables that we use. They're 200% double declining straight line depreciation tables. Brianna, where's that slide? And so when we value personal property, we send out a declaration every year to all businesses. Well, we'll come back, go back. There you go. So we send out a declaration every year to all commercial businesses in the state of Nevada, and it's based on the honor system. So the lien date is July 1st, and we ask them to list all of the equipment that they have in their business as of July 1st, how much they paid for it when they purchased it, because the depreciation itself is based on the year of acquisition. Again, I mentioned there were 9 depreciation tables. There's electronics, there's computers, there's regular equipment, which would be a 15-year life. Mobile homes have a 20-year life, but not all of the equipment itself is going to be fully depreciated like it is with the Internal Revenue Service. All of our depreciation tables have a 5% good, so the maximum depreciation that any of the personal property can get is 95%. So if you take the purchase price, you multiply it times the depreciation, you get what's called the taxable value. Taxable value times 35%, because 35% is the assessment level in the state of Nevada. That gets you the assessed value. And then the assessed value times the tax rate is what the tax amount is. Again, any new equipment that's added to the roll is outside the property tax cap the first year. And so I know that, casinos are probably for us, probably one of our biggest people, because the slot machines and everything, they depreciate really fast and they keep changing everything out, but they also pay a lot of taxes. So go ahead, next screen. So the Department of Taxation, they actually do some of the assessment and discovery work for us. When you have mineral tax, net proceeds of minerals, and I apologize, Brianna and I aren't really familiar with this because we don't have mines in our counties. Eureka County, Humboldt County, Elko County, they have huge mines. And so the Department of Taxation, they do all the calculations for the net proceeds. They then send that value to the county assessors, and the county assessors actually bill it. The Department of Taxation also does what's called centrally assessed property. So if you have utilities or airlines that actually cross county lines, the Department of Taxation values that on a unitary value, and then they actually send that money to each particular county. We don't get involved with that at all. Go ahead. Exemptions. So in the state of Nevada, there are partial exemptions, and the partial exemptions that we have are you can give them to surviving spouses, so that would be widow or widower. People who are declared legally blind. We have veterans exemptions and disabled veterans exemptions. A disabled veteran is considered disabled if his disability through the VA is at least 60%. And you can use those exemptions on either the DMV governmental service tax, or you can use it on the property taxes on an annual basis. We also have partial exemptions for lodges and charitable organizations. And then we also have full exemptions for obviously the state lands and any federal lands. In Carson City, we have about 82% of our land that is actually owned by tax exempt entities. And so only about 18% is actually taxable. So it's a huge amount that we don't receive any kind of taxes on at all. School districts, charter schools, we have an exemption, obviously, the GOED exemption for the pollution control and the economic development and so forth. Low income qualifying housing projects, and we're getting a number of those now, to where if they use federal funds, and use federal credits, and they can go ahead and get an exemption for low income. Churches and chapels as well, they can also be tax exempt. And that's kind of about the exemptions that we currently have. So I'll pass it back to Brianna. Turn your mic on. Brianna. Can't hear you.
Did we lose her?
There I am. So that concludes our presentation. Unless there's any questions that anyone has, we'll be happy to answer them. But like I said, it was a broad overview of what we do as assessors, and just trying to clear up any misunderstanding about us on the valuation side versus the taxes side. We are the value side.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Members, any questions?
Chair, I have one more question.
Okay, go ahead, Senator Roddey.
So I had a constituent reach out to me on the charitable exemption on personal property tax. And their concern was that in the county that they were located in, there seemed to be a more strict interpretation of that charitable status being dependent on public support in the form of donations and gifts, as opposed to a model that's much more common with our charitable human services sector now, which is a lot of state contracts or other grant contracts that they're contracting to provide a service where we have these partnerships with public and private sector. And so the bulk of the revenue for their organization comes from, say, a state contract to serve people with disabilities, but they are definitely still a 501c3 organization. And so I know that that's a pretty nuanced view and maybe not an answer today, but I'm looking to get a sense of if there's something that you feel we might need to clarify in the statutes, that the intent of that law is around charitable organizations more broadly, even if their revenue stream is a state contract, for example, for services. So is that anything that either of you have stumbled over or you could comment on?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Senator Roddey. When you're talking about charitable organizations, NRS 361-140 is very broad in itself. It doesn't really specify that there's any kind of requirements. The statute just says that you have to, whose corporation, whose object or purposes are religious, educational, or public charity. So I've never run across that in Carson City, just because of the broad nature of the statute itself.
In
Senator
Carson City, if you're a C3 and you're doing that work, you're going to be exempt from those personal property taxes.
Senator Roddey, what we do in Carson City, so if they apply for it, then they provide us with the statute that they believe that they qualify for. And then at that point, we send it to the DA, and the DA at that point says, yeah, I believe they do, or they don't. And so we give them our recommendation, but that's about it. It really does depend, but pretty much if they qualify under 140, then we would say, yes, they qualify.
And Senator Roddey, just to note, in Clark, we have had that conversation before, and I believe we got a DA's opinion on that. And I think it starts with, in the statute, where it says, whose funds have been derived in whole or substantial part from grants or other donations. And I think our DA opinion said at least the grants and donations had to be about 51%. But I'll have to double check that, but that's what I remember about our charitable organization, because the statute says a substantial amount. So our DA said it would have to be 51%.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And I think that's I think you hit the nail right on the head there, is that we're seeing that interpretation is being applied. And if it's a state contract, as opposed to a state grant, it's being narrowly interpreted to say that they aren't doing charitable work. Because it's if 50% or more of their budget comes from that state contract.
But
So it sounds like some clarity may be in order.
Okay, yes. And like I said, I'll double check that and get back with you, but I believe that's how our DA interpreted it for us.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's super helpful.
You're welcome.
So I had a quick, a couple of questions, but either one, Ms. Johnson or Mr. Dolly, can you guys discuss the income approach for businesses and how the process works for the County and State Board of Equalization?
Dave, did you want to?
I'll be happy to, but you guys use the income approach much more than we do. So in the state of Nevada, there's actually 3 ways in which we can determine what the actual market value is on the property, or the valuation for the property itself. The first is going to be the cost approach. That's what we use on every single property itself. If a business has stated that they believe, based on the income approach, that their property is actually worth less, then what we require here in Carson City is we require 3 years of their financials. And so we would value their property based on the income approach. If in fact we believe that their valuation is verified through the income approach, at that point we would accept their valuation. If it goes to the County Board of Equalization, I mean, at any point these can be appealed, any property can be appealed. The deadline is January 15th, and it can go to the County Board of Equalization. The County Board at that point can either determine whether they want to use the actual cost approach, the income approach, or the third approach, which is going to be the comparable approach, or the market value approach based on comparable sales. Chairwoman Neal, I'm not sure exactly what your question is about the state board.
Oh, you answered is fine. I just wanted you to talk about the income approach and just get that on the record, because it wasn't discussed. That's all. I'm not going to go super into it in a deep way. But Senator Severs-Gansert has a question, and then I have a couple more after that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so in talking about the income approach, if you have a business that ends up resetting their valuation and therefore their property taxes using the income approach, then the 8% cap applies to the new base. Is that correct? So it basically resets the base, and then the 8% cap applies to that every year, the tax piece.
Senator Severs-Gansert, yes, that is correct. So if whatever the new base is, so if the value is here that the taxes were based on the income approach, it goes down to here. At this point, this is going to be where the new tax cap abatement is going to be based at. The 8% or the alternative cap is going to be based on that value itself. So you're correct.
Thank you. And I don't know if we've looked at the numbers of how non-residential taxes, how that changed and how many businesses opted for the income approach or how that shifted, during the recession, because I think a lot of companies switched to the income approach, which reset their base, and then it grows, of course, at 8%, which is much higher than 3%, but it's still, there's a cap on the growth. So I don't know if we ever looked at how many and what the dollars were upon reset for those that chose to move the income approach. And can you also switch from income back to the market value? I mean, I guess, do we have any limitations on when they can switch or how many times they can switch, or if it's over a certain period?
Okay, Senator Severs-Gansert, let me just back up a little bit because you talked about, and I think Dave talked about, if there is a reduction based on the income approach, that sets a new base. But what we found down here in Clark is that not always just because you get a reduction at the Board of Equalization, sometimes the reduction has no impact on the taxes because they're capped so low. So our last board hearing was today. It's possible that they could have gotten a reduction, but it's not going to change their taxes because what they're paying taxes on is already way lower than what the reduction is. So it doesn't always necessarily set a new base. It just depends on how low the value goes. But in most cases, at least here in Clark, some of the reductions have no effect on taxes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Roddey?
So just to follow up on Ms. Johnson's last comment, and that's because their tax valuation was reset so low during the recession, the last recession, not this recession, that the delta, even based on their income valuation now, their base got set so low in the recession that it's going to take a long time for that to come back up to meet any kind of either income-based or traditionally based assessment. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is correct. Senator
Okay.
Roddey.
That's not quite how I was thinking, that it was maxed out because of the 8% cap overall. So the 8% is sort of what's affecting what people pay versus what their base is. Because no matter what, you still have that 8% that's off of a base at some point in time.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, but I think what's happens when it went down so low in the recession, and then because of the alternative cap conversation that we had earlier, where it hasn't been 8% in most cases for most of the time because of the 10-year rolling average, it's been going up 4.5 or 6 or 3, depending on the alternative tax cap is. So it went down so low in the recession that even though it's come up 3, 5, whatever in the subsequent years, it still hasn't gotten to what their property is actually valued at, even on an income valuation basis.
That is correct. And also, Senator Severs-Gansert, just kind of like the example I gave on the property tax calculation in year 3. And in year 3, you could see that there was a tax cap and their taxes as assessed was lower. So that year in year 3 is going to be now their new base, so to speak. So year 3 is now their new base because they're paying taxes as assessed, and now going forward, they'll be capped on that.
Okay. Thank you.
So on the income evaluation, this is my actual follow-up question, on the income evaluation piece, have the assessors contemplated what they will do if a significant number of businesses want to come in and do income valuation based on 2020, when many businesses were closed for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, particularly talking about our hospitality sector, some of those. Would all of those businesses be eligible to come in and base their income valuation based on 2020 results, which are going to be clearly not an outlier in terms of the valuation of the property?
Yes, thank you, Senator Roddey. So just so you're aware, today was our last Board of Equalization hearing for this year, which is going to set our values for July 1 of 21 through June 30th of 22. And I will say that our values, we didn't have a lot of hotel casinos appeal or many of those property types come before us. I'm hopeful and thankful for the appraisers in the office who did a really good job of trying to analyze that data that we got from the property owners to set our tax values and be proactive in closing the roll in December based on what happened in 2020. And based on that, we did a good analysis using the income approach and just gathering all of the data from the property owners that we could to analyze it. And so far this year, we've taken that into account. And like I said, today was our last board hearing, and I don't think any of our property value reductions are going to impact the tax cap very much at all.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So you're saying that for income valuation properties, you proactively made the adjustments? So they would have already gone down and reset their base based on 2020?
Will not reset their base, but looked at their taxable value. So in December of 20, when we closed our tax rolls, we requested financials from these companies or property owners to say, give us your financials. Granted, it was hard to get fourth quarter because we're closing our tax roll before December. But the information that we did get for quarters 1 through 3, we analyzed that data, looked at the data, did our income approaches, tested out the market, and we did kind of like it's a discounted cash flow. So we went through and analyzed all of the data, and what we've determined set our tax values that there wasn't really much room for reduction. And I think on some of our properties, I think we went back to 2018, 2019 values, and some to 1920 values. But again, having no real effect on actual taxes.
Because of the abatement caps.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, thank you for those questions, Senator Roddey and Senator Gansert. So let me ask you this, Ms. Johnson. So are you saying that you built in deflation into the rate? Because I guess what I'm wondering is that how does that affect? Well, I have a couple of thoughts, right? What does that mean going forward, 23, right? When you see an offset and then things change, what then happens with this calculation that you did now, which kind of took into effect a factor that is not going to be a future factor? And then I have a follow-up to that.
Okay. So again, the information we got as of last roll close or in the end of 2020. So we revalue every year. So meaning next year, we may get financials from this year forward. So we got financials from last year, January of 20 through third quarter of 20. We looked at that to say, this is what we have. And our data valuation, as we know for Board of Equalization, is January 1. So we, again, took that into account. So we didn't do I shouldn't say a direct capitalization summary, but what our appraisers did was they did like a discounted cash flow to say, what if your income starts to stabilize in 3 years? So we kind of looked at what happened in 2020 with the pandemic as 9/11, so to speak, is kind of how we looked at things to say, this isn't a forever thing, but it's something that happened, but maybe 3 years out, 4 years out, things will start to stabilize. So we took all of that into consideration and kind of discounted it back to this year to say, this is the value that we arrived at.
Okay, thank you for that. This is interesting. So, okay, okay, I'm sorry, but this is happening on the business side. But what I guess my next question is, in Clark County, we're having a new construction boom, as they say. Some realtors are even claiming that we may run into that bubble. But so let me tell you what my thoughts are, right? It's almost like a paradox that's existing. So you have business where you're building in deflation in the rate, and then you have this new construction boom that's happening at the same time. Although it was a pandemic, these things were occurring simultaneously. So how are you globally looking at, I guess, the Clark County, I guess, how we're taxing on the one side and then on the other. Can you talk to me about what you're doing with the new construction that's happening during the pandemic and how that's being treated? Were there factors added in, or was it the same?
So you have residential that is booming. So residential and commercial properties are two separate types of property. So residential properties, yes, you can see that the housing market is doing fine. Homes are selling, things are happening. Why that is, we don't know. We just go with the market. So that's what the residential market is indicating. On the commercial side, as we know, office, retail, hotel, casinos were shut down. So that's a different market that we're looking to. So you have two different markets that you're looking at. And because we value some things based on market and we test the market, we have to look at those things. Residential properties, unfortunately, don't get the opportunity to use the income approach because they are residential properties. So we don't use the income approach on residential properties because they're not generating income. Is that what okay.
I'm sorry. I understand that. I understand they're two separate things, but I guess I'm looking at it like globally, right? So when all the taxes go in the bucket, they go in the bucket. And I'm just wondering if there were any factors used for the pandemic when you guys did the evaluation on the residential side. And what it sounds like is no, none of that is being taken into consideration. It's just being treated as if it was 2019, not 2020. Is that?
Yeah, so on the residential side, again, we're cost. The value of the land at full cash value, what Marshall and Swift says the improvements are, we add it to the tax roll as long as we are not exceeding market. That's on the residential side.
And so I wanted to walk backwards on a couple of things that you said. Number one, you had said that there were only 800,000 properties being valued right now. What's driving that number? I mean, how many have phased out? Because trust me, I'm not assuming that because there's 2 million people, 2 million people own a house.
Right.
But I am thinking that there are more than 800,000 properties. So how many have phased out of the property system?
Okay, so what I'll say is we just recently exceeded 800,000 parcels. But of those parcels, there are a percentage of them, which about 90% of our parcels are residential parcels. Then we have about 20,000 of those are commercial parcels. We have some industrial parcels, and then we have vacant land parcels. But the majority of our parcels are residential parcels. So is that kind of your question?
Yeah, I was just trying to understand that number. Mm-hmm. And then I do want to go back to what I was alluding to before. Are you believing that there's going to be a bubble that is getting ready to occur? Like in 2010?
I have no way to predict that, Chairwoman Neal.
I'm just saying, I have been hearing it, and it worries me only because, and I'm getting real broad with this statement that I want to make sure that I guess local governments, when they're building out their budgets around property tax, that they're being a little bit more conservative, and that there are conversations around what all of these factors mean, right? The pandemic factor, this new construction factor, and the fact that we have several other things working in the space where I think that they should be paying attention to, even though they may see growth, which you guys were showing growth in 2022, that they need to be planning for, 23 or 24, something else occurring, and just trying to be a little bit more conservative and not over projecting in terms of property tax, and just assuming that, going lowballing themselves versus anything else. I guess that's just my thought, only because, 2010 and 2011 were very real. That was my first session. And I just don't ever want to come back and hear local governments at the table saying, well, our property tax dropped out and this happened, when we can look at kind of the landscape now and plan and, you know, have a real conversation about the factors at play and make good decisions. I know that, you know, local government, I hope they're in constant conversation with the assessor and I guess the treasurer to help make really good conservative decisions. But, you know, that's just my wish in the pond, I guess. Anyway.
Yeah. Chairwoman Neal, if I could just throw out some stuff real quick. So honestly, I don't think that the values going up are so sustainable. It's just not going to happen. When you see $100,000 increase in a sales price in a 1-year time period, that's not sustainable. It's just not going to happen. I do think there is going to be an adjustment that's going to happen in the real estate market. Is it going to be as dramatic as it was back in 2008? I don't think so, but I've only been doing this for 28 years, so I've only gone through that whole bubble once, so I can't really tell. I also wanted to just give you a little bit of a perspective on the rurals as far as the income approach. So we had 5 appeals this year, which is kind of normal for us. We don't have a whole lot. We have been valuing a number of properties based on the income approach. If you apply for the income approach once, we are automatically going to reach out the next year and try and get your financials so that we can go ahead and value your property again based on those income approach. If the taxpayer is not coming to us to value their property based on the income approach, we're not going to, in Carson City, we're not going to do that. We have been looking at the pandemic. We've been very worried about the commercial values. And so in Carson City, we froze all of our land values this year, not for residential, but for commercial, because we just want to wait and see what's going to happen. We're very conservative over here. And so we have not had a whole bunch. And I don't think a lot of the rural counties have actually had a whole bunch of properties based on the income approach. I do think the majority of them are going to be in the Washoe County and Clark County areas. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Thank
Chairwoman, we can't hear you.
Oh, Chairwoman Neal, did you hear my comments?
I'm sorry. No.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to comment on you talking about being conservative. I just wanted you to know that when we did our projections to the state this year, we were very conservative.
Well, I appreciate that, right? But I'm also very, you know, weird. But I like conservative approaches, but, you know, that's just me. So, members, do you have any other questions? And I was saying, I don't know if Mr. Gendon, he had a thought, but I feel like he should probably ask it himself.
Well, Madam Chair, I just was, when they were going through that, when Mr. Dolly presented a slide on personal property, to maybe go through the situation where a manufactured home could be assessed as real property and not personal property. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Gendon, thank you. There's so many different aspects to the assessment part. I mean, there's so many different variables that trying to cover every single aspect is nearly impossible. My old boss, Kit Weaver, the assessor here before, always said that you should be learning something new every day. And in this job, you do. And so there's just so many things to learn. Mobile homes can actually be converted to real property in that they specifically do it for financing purposes. In order to get a loan, most lenders want the properties to be converted to real property. So in Carson City, it's just a bunch of paperwork. There's no real specifications as far as foundations are concerned. You don't have to have a complete concrete perimeter foundation. In some counties, you do. As long as it meets with the manufacturer's specifications for setup, at that point, the owner or the purchaser of the property will fill out the paperwork to convert the home to real property. They send it to manufactured housing. Manufactured housing and they surrender the title to the home as well, the personal property title. And then manufactured housing will issue what they call a real property notice. And once they actually issue that real property notice, then the mobile home itself, even though nothing has really happened with that home, the depreciation converts from a 5% depreciation for mobile home to 1.5% depreciation for a stick-built structure. So we're going to cost that structure as if it was a stick-built home. And then it would get the 1.5% depreciation for the maximum 50 years or 75%, instead of getting the 5% depreciation each year for 20 years or a maximum of 80%. So they pay a little bit more in taxes when they convert it to real property. The thing about that is once a home is converted to real property, they can actually unconvert it to real property, but they physically have to remove that property from that location within 30 days. So that they wouldn't get the benefit of getting the mortgage and getting a lower interest rate from converting it and then being able to unconvert it to personal property. That's not, they're not able to do that in Nevada.
Thank you for that. All right, members, any final questions? Okay, seeing Senator Dennis, I know you just got back on, but did you have anything that you wanted to bring up?
I don't, Madam Chair. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so thank you, Assessor Johnson and Assessor Roddey. I really appreciate it. It was a good discussion. It's very interesting to hear about property taxes. It's always, I guess, a source of excitement. But I know you're like, I'm going to show up with a property tax and bacon shirt next session. Anyway, but we will go ahead and close out these presentations and open up for public comment.
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working at this time. However, there are no callers.
Okay, we'll give it like 10 seconds, but we're probably not going to have a lot of people calling in saying, I really, really want to talk about this. Okay. Seeing that there are no callers that have called in, thank you guys for this afternoon, and we will adjourn Senate revenue.